studying psilocybin for people with treatment-resistant depression. First time in our country to do it. First time ever in the UC Great White North. So we've got the first ketamine centers. We're doing the first ever government-approved, the nut drug. Patients are starting next week. So we want to win the Super Bowl, tackle this illness now, because people are suffering now, and we're going to, in fact, come with the next generation. So people have solutions now, and they're going to have solutions to look for in the next 2-3 years. So this has been an absolute treat to represent those suffering in my role as CEO. Great to meet you all.
Yeah, no, round of applause for the family. Awesome, I'm super pumped up from that. I don't know about you guys, but you know, what you're going to see with a lot of these companies in the psychedelic space is focusing on a particular compound for a particular indication, whether it's substance use disorder, depression, PTSD, whatever it might be. And Damien and Anthony's companies are both very focused on substance use disorder and other addiction behavioral issues. So I know Damien is more focused on the psilocybin side, and then you got Anthony more focused on Mdma and some of the new chemical entities, and they are doing some stuff with ketamine as well. So if you guys can kind of just talk about this indication, why you guys decided to use that indication, and also the compound that you guys both selected, and why you believe your compounds will be efficacious for those particular disorders.
Absolutely, thank you, Dustin. So the journey for Clairvoyant starts out with having an opportunity to help patients. And we looked at the space, the classic psychedelic space. We looked at, people know there's psilocybin, there's Mdma, there's DMT, there's LSD. And these are known chemicals that have been around from the 60s, 70s, over 100 years ago. And so, we were very passionate about psilocybin, have some personal experience with that. So we dove deep into that and realized that the patents are really not going to stand up. So it's really a generic product. And so we were looking for opportunities to run a short path clinical trial, because our strategy to help patients is to be the first company to register psilocybin in 3 jurisdictions that I mentioned, not in the States, but I can get into later. So we chose psilocybin. My journey with psilocybin is, I have some experience. Mainly, it's from outdoors and camping. I was introduced to the plant-based sector in the mid-90s. I was doing sort of close to undergrad. I was working in advertising and such, but I was doing festivals and weekends meetings to save the overall forest of Vancouver, around Vancouver. So part of that, I then introduced to some medical cannabis activists and meditation. This is kind of going a little back a little further, but I ended up being a multiple sclerosis patient. And so during that process, she said that she was telling me she was late stage, and it was the most effective medicine she had experienced in her journey of medical with multiple sclerosis. And so that, and so we added medical cannabis, industrial cannabis, and activism back then. So I met Hillary Black, who set up cannabis first at the adult dispensary, Gray Market dispensary, which is technically now legal. In the mid-90s. So part of my journey of plant medicine started then as a cannabis company in 2013, sold that in 2019, clinical processing company. I met our CFO Long, who's in the audience here with a great shirt on. And so in regards to psilocybin, sort of had some experiences happening in a place called Fino, experienced psilocybin, it's all about set and setting. I did have a friend who had an experience with psilocybin, a house party, a Halloween house party, I was at a Whistler in his mid-20s. Now he's an assistant principal, but he's like, Damien will never use psilocybin ever again. It was a horrible experience. It freaked me out, and that's still gotten worse. And so it's a very powerful drug, as you all know. And so that's kind of how we gravitated. Myself and co-founder Tom Price-Whitney, who's at 25 years as a patent and IP lawyer in Canada and the U.S. So we picked psilocybin. We wanted to be the first to market in Canada, and we were looking at the depression trials, and you're aware that there's some amazing companies out there doing great work at treatment for depression, PTSD, and we chose addiction because we believe that it's more of a quantifiable endpoint. And so our primary endpoint for our trial is reducing people who are reduction of the heavy drinking days. There was a study done, an academic study done in the University of Mexico in 2015 by a prominent researcher called Dr. Grogan-Schutz, and he demonstrated a significant drop in people drinking days using a dose size of 25 milligrams of psilocybin in capsule format. So our protocol for our clinical trial is closely following that open-label academic study. And so so we're doing that from. We believe that, depression trials, I'm not sure if you saw the results of the Compass trials that came out yesterday, definitely tuning for them, but it's a very tricky indication of people with some very serious mental health issues, and there's a lot of, there's this, it's called a MARS, which is a depression sort of study, or depression scale, that measures the level of depression, and it's a tricky sort of primary endpoint. And so we've chosen the reduction of heavy drinking days. We think it's very quantifiable, and we believe that Health Canada, we had our appreciation meeting with Health Canada in September 8th, and went very well. They set the best protocols that we've seen thus far, because the randomized and placebo. So really, there's some detail there on our journey to date, and we're really excited. We'll be submitting our clinical trial application in early December. And when we register in January, when we get approval in January, we'll be the second company in the world approved by a federal regulator to operate a phase 2 psilocybin therapy trial that has a confirmed dosage of 25 milligrams. So that's our journey to where we are now, and really excited to hear about Anthony and his journey with Mdma, please.
Thank you very much. So, a round of applause for that, because that's a really sterling, brilliant progress. So for us, the reason that we chose addiction, and we're so laser focused on addiction, is it's all about the individual, our families, our communities. We're so debilitatingly affected by this terrible disease. It's the single biggest unmet medical need of modern times. If you take alcohol use disorder, for example, it affects 5% of the planet. Only 16% of people that have that disease seek treatment. The reason for that is there's a 75% failure rate within the first 12 months for treatments for that disease. And it's just not bloody good enough. And it's been not bloody good enough for about 200 years. There hasn't been a development, a major development or breakthrough in the treatment of addiction for at least 50 years. We were better at treating alcohol addiction in the Victorian times than we are today. And that is just not good. So what we've done is we've built what we believe to be the best team in the world focused on the use of psychedelics to treat addiction. We've got Professor David Nutt working for us as our Chief Research Officer. He's a global authority in the area of the use of psychedelics to treat addiction, with his particular specialism in alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, and opioid addiction. And we've got Assistive, you know, as our Chief Medical Officer. He's got deep experience in the use of Mdma to treat addiction, having run the world's only trial for Mdma for alcohol use disorder. The results of that trial were published in February of this year, and instead of a 5% relapse rate at month 9, it was a 21% relapse rate at month 9. Those people who went through Mdma-assisted psychotherapy for alcohol use disorder. That's groundbreaking. That is groundbreaking. That has the ability to provide hope for individuals who the current system is just not bloody working. We also are working on our team, Professor Celia Morgan, who's head of department in the University of Exeter, works for us on a part-time basis. And she completed the world's only trial for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy for alcohol use disorder that will be published in the American Journal of Psychiatry in the coming weeks. And when published, that will prove that ketamine for alcohol use disorder, or ketamine used to treat alcohol use disorder, is considerably more effective than anything currently available in the marketplace. And much like Praxia, we like ketamine because ketamine is a medicine, it's approved, it's available in the marketplace, and doctors who are experienced can prescribe it off-label. So we're the first company in the world to be delivering evidence-backed ketamine-assisted psychotherapy for alcohol use disorder in the clinics that we have operational today. Because we're a biotech company, but we also have clinics. So we're bringing that research forward. The ketamine one from phase 2B, we're in the process of assessing how to bring that forward into phase 3 to execute our purpose, democratization of psychedelics. Because if we get it in phase 3, we're much closer to marketing authorization and approval and reimbursement and helping individuals and families. We're also looking to bring that study forward from phase 2A into phase 2B for Mdma. We're running a drug discovery program because we like Mdma, I'm sure many of you do as well. But from a clinical context, it sometimes isn't as flexible as you need it to be. It's a 6 hours to work, a 6-hour recovery window, and from an economics basis, can be a challenge in the clinics business. So we're trying to see if we can reduce the time window for Mdma. And we're also not only focused on substance addictions like alcohol, but we're actually also looking at behavioral addictions. And we've initiated what we believe to be the first study of its kind in the world, which is the use of the psychedelics. Actually, the first time anyone tried to use develop a pharmacological treatment for behavioral addiction in gambling disorder, which affects about 5% of the population of the planet, much like alcohol. So we've initiated a study to assess if ketamine can be useful in the treatment of gambling. So that's us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Such an important indication. We're going to switch gears to turn to a different indication. Female hypoactive sexual dysfunction. I think I'm saying that correctly. She mentioned the Desire Project, and it wouldn't be fair to have the audience wait too long to hear more about it. So, tell us a little bit about the indication, the size of the market, the compound, and what your plans are with the Desire Project.
So, just believe that hypoactive sexual desire dysfunction. It occurs in both men and women, but we're focused on the ladies because there isn't anything in the market that's a substitute. So, as much as I'd love to say it was like a noble pursuit to think that I was going to do something that was actually started out as a little bit of a force moment. Mdma and psychotherapy can help a lot of things. Something that I know that people legalize. People like Mdma is a love drug, and there's a reason for that. Not the sex drug. And then the second piece was just like fundamental building a business once we market it could, utilize some help and there's an opportunity to do service. So looking at using Mdma with psychotherapy, our team has the two most well-studied researchers in sexual desire and sexual function. And we also have the lead researcher from the MAPS Mdma phase 3 trial. So the kind of all-star cast driving directly with this idea. And I'm just on the indication of strictly for practical. So this may be like marginal income for people who aren't okay about talking about sex and psychedelics at the same time.
So, how's that one?
Okay. Okay. So for the most part, people focus on orgasm, which is good, and everybody likes that. And it's like fireworks show. Yeah. Before the orgasm, there is arousal. There's like a playing field in there. Before arousal, there is desire. Desire is a piece that is most behaviors. These between the right. And so for us, this idea of focusing on something that's really driven by mental health and really rooted for women predominantly in this experience of a number of years of experiences sexually or otherwise in a relationship, a hard time connecting with self and others. And sometimes it's body issues that are just simply not being accessible to the human. And although it sounds like it's like, I make trying to joke about sex and psychedelics, it really is devastating for women who want the person that they're with or totally unable to. And eventually they lose relationships, and oftentimes they wind up having a hard time reconnecting to themselves. So it's a great indication. We're really proud to support it. We have an interesting class with a team who is 25 to research for it. We'll be dosing women in Q3. So if you or someone you know love to ask her friends, I'm curious. And the fellow that you're going, so it really isn't me. Like she says, it's not you, it really could be that. It could be. So, we're interested in hearing from you because we call it the Desire Project. It's not just about doing research, it's actually about having an open conversation about the fact that women's sexuality is important. Desire is not that taboo, It's a long ways from the orgasm stage, it's just like that moment you look at someone and you felt the connection. So that's what we're working on.
I think it's great. I mean, look, guys have Viagra, and at the end of the day, like, it's kind of like a Me Too type movement thing. Like, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be leaving females out of the equation. So I think it's great. Is the compound you're working on Mdma? Is it?
Yeah, we're leading with Mdma. We have some other ideas.
And so obviously with the phase 3 clinical trials through MAPS, obviously they've proven that Mdma is really great for PTSD, which is trauma-based.
Yes.
And I'd imagine a lot of sexual dysfunction has to do with trauma. So
Can be. I think there's two parts of this. The yeah, thanks for bringing us on. There's two parts of this. There's like, just because you don't meet the all caps PTSD threshold doesn't mean that you don't have an impact on mental health. And so a lot of the things we do in that community kind of left out. And then another thing on that for us as a business is the beautiful thing is we're, you know, actively behind that. We started the whole thing. And by the time we come to market, clinics already laid out with therapists who are well trained, we train up on our training program. And so we'll be able to deploy on that. So, you know, coming from near you quite readily. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. I imagine there's a lot of comorbidity between PTSD and
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of comorbidity with ultimately depression. So a lot of the our community talk to a bunch of therapists and how they're going to be playing ultimately. And a lot of them eventually end up becoming depression. So it's like part of that. So it's growing at 26% a year, not because more women have it, but because more women are showing up and being like, something's not right. Yeah.
So Dr. Roger McIntyre over here is one of the foremost ketamine doctors. So I'm just going to kind of give just like a really super broad, open question. I mean, you are a guy with ketamine. What's the most exciting piece of research you're working on as it relates to ketamine right now?
That's great question. Thanks for that very much. And, you know, I started thinking about, first of all, as a comment, we're hearing from my colleagues here. You know, I've been here for 25 years, as I mentioned, and I don't recall a time where there's been so much hope in this field. I mean, psychiatry has never enjoyed a surplus of goodwill. And I believe Jack Nicholson was part of that. But we haven't had the surplus of goodwill, the surplus of rewards, and I think frankly the surplus of opportunity we have now. This is very, very exciting. And when I look at the landscape of mental illness across America, around the world, it's abundantly clear that depression is the leading cause of lost brain capital. And we all know the economies have changed towards a brain capital economy. I'm not talking about Silicon Valley only, I'm also talking about local countries. And what we've also been very familiar with during the last 2 years with the global pandemic is not only a public health crisis, it's a global mental health crisis. And that's amplified not just the number of people affected by depression, the most common disorder around the world, but it's also amplified the urgency of care. And so ketamine, the opportunity of ketamine is that it's legal. Protocols have been prepared by our group according to clinical practice guidelines. And there's a known here. I get across the finish line with regulators and they have it reimbursed. What I'm particularly excited about, what we're doing, is we're not only looking at derivatives of ketamine in the near term, but we're looking at ways to implement this as part of practice scientific. So I often say if you have a solution for a mental health problem in our population, that solution cannot be accessed by the end user, then you don't have a solution. And unfortunately, the great majority of people do not have access to these trainings. So what we're building into our development is best practices, ways best practices guidance. It has to drive by what the authorities of the field have adapted, what they practice, and have published as guiding principles. So what we have to have is a treatment now to be available within those guardrails. And the treatments have to be safe, good and effective. But they have to be accessible. So how the hell are they going to be accessible if you have this problem forever? People can't access them. Well, one of the positives that came out of COVID, not really positive, but one positive that didn't work was the adoption of technology. Psychiatry has been a bit of a laggard when it comes to technology for a host of reasons. But we've been a laggard. And not only did the utilization of the technology skyrocket, but two other things happened. The confidence and trust participation of the end user in the clinical decision process. What that means is that we develop ketamine treatment, develop with you not just for the sake of the fact that that's a guarantee, but treatments that will be implemented to take these treatments at scale for large organizations that require treatment at scale. That's what they need to see. And that's what we're doing at Braxton Scientific. Parenthetically, we now just going for scientific board of the folks at Mdma. They're doing some really cool stuff. And they're born, Taylor King, doing some really cool stuff. We're trying to take medicine to the patient, trying to take medicine to the real world natural habitat. And when we published the clinical practice guidelines on ketamine, published in May of this year, I made a point to make it very clear that we've got to have scale and implementation. We never abandon the priority of safety, but we have to have scale and implementation to be able to implement psychedelics in a less intensive environment. And if that's somebody's home, possibly. Is it only going to be confined to super specialized clinics? I hope not. So we're in fact looking at how we can develop ketamine in hair drug derivatives, working on that. We've got government of Canada sponsored. This is the first time ever the Canadian government has given a private company money to do research on a treatment for depression. I never heard of this. First time ever. Now then, Dr. Trudeau, and maybe Margaret Trudeau too. So we're doing this right now to integrate the technology that has to affect systems once it's starting to be imposed, because given what we have learned over the last 20, 30 years, a solution's not enough, and that's really implemented to be the solution. And I've been talking advocacy, work with the DBSA, which is the largest advocacy group of depression here in America, and this is in fact what people want, is the access. So that's a very important reality check for Braxton Scientific.
Thank you. So you mentioned, Roger mentioned technology, and our fund has been looking at a lot of different technology plays. And in every industry, there's new technologies that emerge, and technology always becomes the core of really moving things forward. So I know MindCure has their own digital tech, and I know that Awaken recently did an LOI to kind of utilize their protocols on that tech. So do you mind, Ms. Kelsey, giving us a little bit of a background on what that tech is, and then Anthony, talk a little bit about the protocol, and then we can talk about what this LOI looks like.
Yeah, so we, in early days, I have experience with the medicine market. I had to, what is the thing that could help me out before I went into practice, and prepping for it, in session, and integration, etc. And then starting to look at the system that we have, how we deploy treatment therapy, and identified a lot of opportunities that technology can just enable it, and not necessarily always replace the human. And so we built this end-to-end product, and it brings patients through the whole journey, and it helps therapists deploy the care better, and it collects all the data so we can optimize it with machine learning. And the second thing that it does, I mean, that wasn't enough, so it allows us to scale globally, so we can pop this up anywhere that people need treatment care, and where different molecules are legal. So that's kind of exciting. And the third piece around it is a lot of us in the industry are developing really interesting treatment protocols, and it can be really difficult because the traditional model of drug sales is sell a pill. It's not sell a pill in a protocol with an understanding of how to deploy. And so we came up with this idea of how do we help the industry scale globally en masse, and that means, being a distribution partner of people that are doing best in class protocol design. So for us, that looks like the distribution network for the platforms, kind of like the Netflix and Psychedelic and therapeutic care, where we distribute the content to the people who need it. And Anthony is the first partner that we approach because cannabis speaking, it's really important in early days to have some of the most evidence-backed protocols on the system, so that we can bring in the good patient data to run the things next. So that's what we built, and that's what we're scaling out. I'm super proud to be doing it with
Thank you very much. We're super proud and super happy to be working with you guys on this. And it's like Kelsey said, that there's a couple of things that are really important for many industries. Data is obviously one. I hear data is going to be the fuel for the fourth industrial revolution. So having systems that capture the data in a structured manner enables people to interrogate the data, find patterns, make changes, improve them. That's huge. But, so for us, we're a biotech company. We do two things. We do development, we do delivery. Development side, we're doing all the stuff I said before, we're looking at Ketamine, Mdma, our molecules, therapy, substance behavior addiction. On the delivery side, we're building clinics, right? And we're building clinics because, just as Kelsey said, you can't just deliver the pill. That's psychiatry. And psychiatry hasn't always been as effective as it could be for treating mental health or for addiction. So for this industry to work and for them to help the individuals, their families and communities that bloody well need help, you gotta have the compounding, the therapy, the therapist, and the scene and setting. So for companies like us who are focused on biotech, we have the clinics so that we can test and validate what we're doing in the real world as we're developing it to make sure it's fit for purpose. But then when you start working in an indication like addiction and you realize how poorly served most of the planet is in the nutrition of this particular indication or condition, and you're lucky enough to be in a position like we are, where we partnered with the big university in the UK, and we're lucky enough to in-license IP from a trial that I mentioned before during one of its times. It ain't fair of us to just sit on it like this and only deliver it in the UK and the EU. There's an awful lot of other bloody people out there that need help. So that's why we're partnering with Mike here on this. It's to use technology to enable us to scale this ex-UK, ex-EU, so that we can help as many people as possible. And what we're kind of envisaging is, indeed, is we have an awakening clinic as a clinic within the main addiction treatment clinics outside the UK, EU, with Kelsey's platform, being a platform that enables the practitioners in those clinics to access the protocol and deliver the protocol the way it's meant to be designed, and with the probability of success, and ideally end up with something better than a 75% failure rate, and actually do a good job.
I'm going to add one thing. So, I mean, they've cost. How do you scale something globally and provide like the highest standard of care in the world? It's pretty amazing. The other thing I want to add though is like this little bit of the human component about something that's unique to psychedelic practice and psychedelic medicine is that in almost every case as a patient, they have a colleague in their own. It requires of the individual to show up for self. And there's something interesting about that specific to, I mean, across most of the indications, but specific to alcohol use disorder and a couple of others, is this idea of how those patients want to get back to someone who's coming in behind them. It's kind of part of the whole, like, part of the AA that works really well with this idea of having a sponsor. And so in the early days of our program, we're hearing a lot of feedback about people wanting to engage in the platform, but it's shitty and hard and they don't want to do it. But they're doing it because they've done the first 10 days and they want to do something for the data set help the next person who comes through have a better and smoother experience. But it just like, we hear so many bad things about technology and gamification and all this, and it's surprising to me, and obviously, design, but it's just this humanity, and that people want to help people, and it's this really cool outcome. People want to come to the platform and do the hard work, but they kind of feel like they're helping someone else. So that's the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Anthony mentioned the clinic side. So Anthony's company Awaken, in addition to doing drug development, they also have clinics. Roger's company as well, in addition to drug development, they also decided to open up clinics. So Roger, why do you think it was important to also have clinics, and what's kind of your strategy behind your clinic rollout for Gracia?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think for us, the way I think about this is this is something that's going to be critical to the implementation of psychedelics because of the resources required to implement this in a way that's affordable and accessible. Is that in addition to managing the medication of the patient, you want to also match the intensity of the health environment to the patient. And I can tell you after 100,000 people later that I've met with depression, our center is the largest in the world. We have more volume of depression in the world. And what people have taught me, among other things, is that a clinic is a pair of blue jeans, a good pair of blue jeans and a fit for some. But frankly, it's too much for them. And there's a variety of other sort of day-to-day convenience aspects that make it more difficult and so on. But just staying on what the clinical need is, a clinic is certainly appropriate for an important subpopulation. But the reality is that even within that group of people, like any other chronic disease, when in fact the illness is successfully treated, and I can say that we publish more data on ketamine than anyone, so we got 60 to 70% of people better. Our batting average for the last 60 years was 10%, now 60 to 70% in depression. So these folks can step down. They can step down to a less intense environment. Moreover, many people don't need clinics. They actually can come to maybe a less prescriptive environment. Going back to my point earlier, it's our really intent to identify who those people are, of course, given the appropriate setting for their particular care. So clinics are absolutely essential because, for example, the most proven ways to give ketamine in depression is intravenously and intranasally. And that should only be given in a full shot. When it comes to other routes of delivery like sublingual and oral, obviously the scale is provided, the ease of use is provided, and so is the opportunity for a less prescriptive environment. So we have indeed many people who are very ill, hopefully for a short period of time, after successful treatment, we're going to need greater intensity care. Therein we have clinics. And the clinics will be sort of a hub and spoke, if you will, with in fact the lesser or less restrictive environment. And this is facilitated by the technology. So the government of Canada gave us another grant. The other grant they gave us to Braxia and myself was look at integrating internet-based cognitive therapy with ketamine to reduce suicide. See, today in America, 150 people kill themselves. It's 150 people a day that's reported, which means it's much higher. So suicide is not a mental illness. But the illness that's most associated with suicide is depression. With 80% of people who kill themselves have depression. So we want clinics to be matching the intensity of the care required. And for many of these people, intensity is proxied by the severity of the depression they can't get out of bed. For other people, it's proxied by suicidality. At least it's imperfect, but it's a somewhat useful proxy. So we're interested in really addressing this imperative of depression and the other imperative of suicide. And you know, we're really in this kind of interesting time politically in so many ways around the world. And one of that sort of this back and forth we get for 50 or longer, hundreds of years, is stakeholder versus shareholder capitalism. I can't think of a better stakeholder capitalism than addressing suicide and addressing depression. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it in a way that's very much guided by the best practices. We have the experience, and frankly, what I've learned in my life is that all you need to do is get good people around you, aggregate their ideas, and then see, if I just cited one person, that's called plagiarism. If I cite the smartest people I know, I'm called a good CEO. All of them, you're going to bring it all together. And so it's very, very clear that we in fact need clinics, but we also need in fact to have the scope and the wheel model so we're matching the intensity. And frankly, this is what payers want to see. And to get this to the next level, acquisitions must take place. And Big Pharma is watching this, and they need to see the line of sight. And that's the line of sight they want to see. They've been given very clear instructions to me, Braxia.
So you mentioned the sublingual administration, the intensity part of it. It sounds like you're implying that perhaps maybe at home
therapy with a sublingual route of administration would be sufficient. And to the extent you want to kind of expand on what you're doing with Ketamine or that you're open to do so, if you want to share that with us.
Yeah, and I think that what you do is you start with an aspiration. And our aspiration is we want to address this impairment. I said that very clearly to many organizations around the world. And frankly, it is not good enough as business, and it's not good enough as a public health initiative to say we only want to treat 5% of people who are suffering. I mean, that's a farcical statement. I want to treat 5% of the population who suffer, the 95%, that's life. Well, that's not life. So we need to, in fact, find a way to make this happen. Now, I know what's going on up here, and we need all the things and so on. I want to be very, very clear on this, folks. And it is that we don't want, and we ain't going to negotiate on this thing. And the safety of these treatments has to be front and center. And I want people come to the talk and say, hey, what? I got this new medicine. It has no side effects. And I think to myself, that's interesting because my big placebo is a 70% rate of side effects. These are side effects. So we have to have safety. We have to have safety first. And that means we have to find a way to implement this in an environment that's least restricted but safe with the appropriate safeguards. Now, 20 years ago, this was a fantasy. But that's not a fantasy anymore because we have the technology to surveil people at home, to surveil them in a very closed, monitoring way. We already get, for example, palliative care at home. This type of treatment's already happening. So can we adapt the best practices in the clinic to the best practices at home? This has to be data tested. It has to be thoroughly thought through. There's obviously people aspects with respect to transferring medications, etc. When I started the endpoint is we have to find a way to scale this and don't compromise the safety, and we want that. So we're not interested in dealing with 5% of the problem. We're interested in dealing with the whole problem. And the whole problem exists in the natural habitat, not in super specialized clinics. So we have to do it, but we're doing it ruthlessly, adhering to these types of guiding principles on safety.
Thank you. And so, a lot of these companies, obviously this is a panel of global companies, really. They're working in various jurisdictions, and, the USA is one of the largest markets, and the FDA is the gold standard. But as you've heard somebody speak about, they're not all going after that market. And Clairvoyant is one of those companies focused on the UK, the EU, and Canada. So, Damien, if you could just talk a little bit about the different markets and why you decided to pursue those markets as opposed to the U.S.
Absolutely. I was spending time in the U.S. and spent a lot of time down here. A lot of time in the U.S. growing up and Canada as well. But when we have a very experienced drug development team with over 100 years of experience in drug development, between our co-founder Tom and our Lloyd, Pat, and Ali. So we really looked at, like I mentioned, this classic psychedelic space and these molecules that have been known for some time. And even MAPS has said that they'll be forced to have 5 years of activity with Mdma. So we looked at that, and we looked at the ultra uber competitive nature of the American pharmaceutical industry, and so what we believe will happen in regards to psilocybin, the molecule that we're passionate about, improving the lives of our patients, and actually helping the rest of the community, is we believe that the market will become generic in 2 to 3 years in psilocybin. And so when you look at the cost, it's going to cost us $42 million US over the next 3.5 years to register psilocybin in the UK, Canada, and EU, potentially other large markets like Japan and Australia as well. And so we looked at that cost of capital and what it would take. And when you're only going to have 2 or 3 years to make that money back, clinical trials in the US would have cost us probably 2.5 times as much as well. So that was just, concern. There is a litany of Canadian companies that have gone to the U.S. and various industries and struggled. So we are stepping back from the American market, and we're focused on, we've had some really interesting, we've been doing our first round of financing, and over the last while, people are like, we haven't heard this before. What are you guys doing? What are you talking about so patent? No, these companies are getting patents. And so it's been a deep education process, and people have told us they have a bold strategy, and it's the first company to register in these jurisdictions to catch the data exclusivity. So we have to be first, but there is opportunities as well with alcohol use disorder to partner with other companies that are doing different indications and maintain that exclusivity. So to address Justin's question, it was just the uber competitive nature of the American pharmaceutical industry, and there are going to be other companies that want to register psilocybin in the markets that we're interested in. And what happens is that exclusivity goes to the first company, and the second company to come in, there's generic companies out there that are chomping on the bit, that will sell these products. And I think Javier Singh is here. He's a friend of mine who's Canada, president of Canada's largest generic drug companies. I'm sure he'd love to sell psilocybin as well one day. And so we know that our competition is not an industry in the psychedelic industry. Our competitors are generic drug companies. How can we keep them out? How can we keep them out? And so you probably, interesting sort of data analysis, well, you probably heard of GW Pharmaceuticals, and they're the British company that registered CBD with Epidiolex in the US for children that have epilepsy. And so it really wasn't talked about very much, but it looks like that GW Pharma has about 3 years left to get exclusivity, and then there's CBD companies out there that have the same chemical and can be genericized in a couple, 3-4 years. And so there's not a large amount of awareness. And we're a friend of ours works at a friend of our co-founder works at J and Justin Johnson in Vancouver, and she's like, they're focused on patents, and they really weren't aware of this. So it's a bit of a novel, it definitely is a novel approach to drug development. And it's a very complex business developing. We're doing our investigators for sure. We're developing our protocol, doing our master informed consent form, interviewing multiple clinical research organizations, the CROs that take 80% of our budget, and picking one that has deep experience in alcohol use disorder. And so my point being is that just being a drug development company on its own is incredibly complex. And so we're staying in our lane in drug development. In my past chapter, we're setting up one of Canada's first like 90 companies in Canada to be a medical processor. We were always doing some business in Germany, Israel, which is fantastic. And if I had just focused on the largest legal federal cannabis market in the world and being a consumer packaged good company, it would have, if those companies had done that, they would have done well. We exited and we did well for our shareholders. So based on my past experience, the past experience of our CFO Juan as well, who exited his company for a fair amount, we're staying in our drug development lane. We're staying, we're fortunate to have Peter as an investor, and we have an Israeli venture capital firm as an investor, and they're like, bang, right away, first call, you guys are a generic drug company. There's no one really doing that. So the awareness is growing, and we're really excited to move it fast and help out all these sort of patients. One last thing is to Anthony's point as well. We had to focus on the indication of this unmet medical need, because then the regulators are going to be more favorable and move faster with you. Like alcohol is Anthony, there's Caprosat, there's naltrexone, there's a 12-step program. So the alcoholics are out there. It's published in the New York Times 2 months ago. Less than 25% of them are seeking any sort of program. It's a 12-step program. Some people like it because it's faith-based, and it works for my cousin, but it doesn't work for everybody. So there's a huge unmet medical need. Patients are hurting out there, and we want to get this drug to the market as fast as possible, and that's how we're going to help our patients.
Thank you. And so we're gonna open it up for questions in just a minute. So if you have a question, I think Sam, do you have a mic? You'll be walking around. All right. So Sam, raise your hand if you have a question. Sam will get to you. But first, wait. Ask one more question before we start. Just real quick, all these companies right now, they are publicly traded and available, and I'm sure some of you guys want to learn more about these companies. So can each one of you just kind of quickly, before we open up for Q&A, maybe give your ticker number out and any contact information about your companies, or if anyone wanted to ask any further questions.
For sure. We're not, but now.
You guys aren't yet. You guys aren't. We just invested. Not yet.
Yeah, and our last company is public, so we'll public market. So, but yeah, clairvoyantrx.com. We're a private company. We closed our first round. We'll be doing our second round, launching it in January when we get a letter of approval from Health Canada to launch the trial. So in contact, happy to help chat afterwards and contact our website or through Dustin or here. So yeah, look forward to engaging, and we're close to our $2.6 million round US, and we'll be launching our $5 million US round in January. So it's exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, so best place to find out more about our company is awakenlifesciences.com. So Awaken spelled A-W-K-N, A-W-A-K-N, lifesciences.com. Been a long few days. On our ticker, we're listed on the New York Exchange in Canada, and we're on the OTCQB here in the US. So it's AWKN in Canada, AWKNF in the US. And the goal for the company is to get on the NASDAQ at some stage next year. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're Mind Cure Health. You can find us at mindcurehealth.com. Pretty straightforward. I'm Kelsey Ramsden. You can always send me things. I answer questions all the time. So at Kelsey Ramsden on Insta is probably the most direct way, but you can try to hit me up on the and we trade under MCUR on the Canadian Securities Exchange and MCURF as in Frank on the OTCQX Best in the States.
Easy to find, Braxia Scientific on the internet. You send inquiries there. There's BRK Brax. We're on the CSC and CAN OTC here in America. And you can reach out to Braxia Scientific's website, and or you can just go on, type my name, Roger McIntyre, on Google. You'll see lots of what I'm saying about this space.
Questions? Sam, you want to take the mic?
Wait. What about you, Dustin? How do people get in contact with you? You've been hosting this for 6 months and still don't remember to ever give your own information. How do people find out about you, Dustin?
We're not publicly traded. Eaterinvestments.com. You can click on the contact form on our website. Also follow me on IG, Dustin R10, or LinkedIn, Dustin Robinson. So various ways to get in touch with me. Also, my email address is dustin@eaterinvestments.com.
What about Mr. Psychedelic Law?
Mr. Psychedelic Law on IG as well, and also Mr. Cannabis Law on IG as well. That's my law firm.
Awesome, thank you. And thanks to all the panelists, and thanks to everybody who came out tonight. Obviously, I know that a bunch of people here were at Microdose Wonderland, which was an incredible and inspiring event. About 2,000 people. If you weren't there or aware, we're at the Arch Center for the last 2 days with panels like this going on for about 6-8 hours a day, side breakouts. There's so much interesting stuff happening in this space across all different levels, more substances, more companies, more indications, legal, lifestyle, stuff about spirituality and entheogenic stuff. So much exciting stuff happening at the same time, and it's really happening like right now. Like that was the first big conference that happened, and it happened in Miami, which I think as a city is really exciting for all of us. So cheers to us. I have a feeling it's going to be back next year just based on the success. But also this is the 6th of this, right? So Soho House has been incredibly open to having people who are interested in learning more about this can gather, connect, and bring all these incredible guests in, which Dustin has done an amazing job of curating and moderating. So thank you, Dustin, for that. And thank you all. Continue to share this information. This happens once a month. Usually Dustin has it on his Instagram, so that's a good way to find out about it and reach out. Because the more that people are gaining awareness and able to learn more and then share that, that's going to be the most important piece of advocacy, that in the end, these companies aren't going to go anywhere if A, no one knows what they're doing or why it's happening or if it's safe, or is it all about like mushrooms, is it all about ketamine? I thought ketamine put you in a K-hole. These are the kinds of things that people need a lot of clarity and awareness around. So big out to all of you. Thanks so much. And hand up, who's going to be the brave one that does the first question? Okay, right in the front.
Thank you so much for that. Hello, my name is Jade. For the last 6+ years, I was working at MapCorps, but I'm associated with psychedelic studies. Excited to get involved in the investment space. I was just curious for the two of you, as you start to roll out your product, are you going to be looking at group, like how this will be administered, Are you looking at groups? Are you curious? I'm curious to know also MAPS has a model about a dyad team. So as you look at healing, especially among those are women, sexual trauma healing, I was just curious if your business model will integrate that as well as any social justice elements.
So maybe I'll take that. So yeah, with our business, we believe in a couple of things as a company. I say externally it's about democratizing psychedelics, but it's also about doing the bloody right thing. And the bloody right thing means helping people, right? Helping as many people as possible, democratizing psychedelics, and that is why we're investing so much money in the research to make these solutions, these medicines available on the public healthcare system in the UK and the EU. And that is ultimately how we will be socially responsible. Because if they're available through the public healthcare system, that is open access for more people, as long as the medical practitioner views that as being correct. But not only that, we are and will actively working to integrate these services into the community. So with addiction treatment in particular, there's a fairly significant drop-off in success when people leave their residential care. They go in for 6 weeks, they get dried out, it costs them 50 grand, whatever the number is. They don't touch a drop of alcohol or whatever substance is causing them problems because it's not available and they're in a safe environment. They go home, they go right back to their council flat, they go right back to the pub around the corner, the betting shop around the corner. There's no one there to help them. So what we're doing is our clinics are embedded in the community. We use the community as a support network for people who are in our clinics. And when they're finished treatments with us, what we'll be doing is there's a space in the clinics that we currently have open, and in every clinic we open, we'll have a community space in it. And the community space is made available in the evenings and at the weekends for community services. So be that yoga, breathwork, Pilates, group therapy sessions at close to no cost. So that the community is a support network for people as they are going through treatments with us, but also when they leave our treatments and they're back in the community. So that's kind of how we're addressing that within the clinics environment that we're building ourselves.
Kelsey? I think it was addressed to you as well.
Excellent. So, so the way that we look at this thing is how can we utilize technology to be embedded in the right places so we can get access to the right places at the right time, and speedily and reducing costs, quite honestly. And so when we talk about, having the diet and keep people in care, we believe in that. In particular, with respect to female sexual desire dysfunction, it's really important because there has been a history of a variety of things that haven't gone the way that we would have liked, and that happens. And it just shouldn't happen. That's pretty straightforward. And with respect to the technology, we imagine the opportunity where, I'll use the example that you just used, Anthony, with respect to people who are suffering from any type of addiction, but in particular with us, it's opiate addiction, the Ivy program, this idea of how can we help those people reintegrate into the community, because we know that passive biometric monitoring, you can actually start to identify some of the pre-markers to HRV that people are about to relapse. And so some note can be sent to their therapist to give them a ring, reach out to someone in the family and say, hey, this person's not doing okay. So identifying the place where technology can really expand the care and provide better long-form care, and of course collecting the data so that we can provide better care. That's how we're going to do it.
And one thing I just want to say real quick, we have a lot of people here from MAPS, and for those of you that don't know MAPS, they're probably one of the most amazing organizations that's been around, and they're probably the reason that all of us are here right now. So if you don't know who MAPS is and you want to learn more, I definitely encourage you guys to learn about it and really do whatever you can to help propel them forward. They're in phase 3 clinical trials for Mdma for PTSD. Still going to cost a lot of money to get it through, and then also to get it commercialized and get clinics rolled out. So they really need the help of the industry and really society at large to really propel them forward. So I encourage everyone to really try to get behind them and try to push them forward as much as you can.
I'm also going to jump on that ad that they have a tremendous website, like the resources, like if you're curious about all sorts of molecules, all sorts of treatment, all sorts of history, like they just do the level best job. So yeah, just echo
code loudly. Please check them
Go
out.
Maps.
Maps.
Round of applause for Maps.
I just want to ask a question to Dr. McIntyre, because every time I spend time with him, I find out some other thing that he's doing, and I'm like, oh my god, that's bigger than the last thing. So, I know, you're doing this study into the Chinese government on mood disorders and things, which blew my mind the other day, but I know you guys trained 25 plus psilocybin facilitators in Canada in the last number of weeks. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that, how you're doing that.
Be happy to do so. Thanks for that, Zappy. And yeah, just to say a few more words about the work we're doing in Asia. Unfortunately, depression is a global phenomenon. And 4 years ago, I was approached by the Chinese government to address the scourge of depression in China. And we originated the largest study ever conducted in the world in depression, 6,000 people in one study. And this is a study I'm leading in China, 80 sites. And it really speaks to what I see as the future of psychedelics. We're talking about trying to help people with ketamine now, and psilocybin is going to be hopefully a close, second behind that. And that's what we want to do now. I can even use the word cure possibly in the very near future. But what we're also mindful of is, can we prevent depression in the first place? And there's a variety of ways that we're looking at this to prevent depression. It does involve, in some cases, some psychosocial strategies, but may also involve some pharmacologic strategies to prevent the onset of depression. So would you rather get COVID, or would you prefer to prevent it? So I think we prefer to prevent illnesses than treat them. And so that's what we're doing in China. It's the first study like it in the world, and we're going to read out the next 2 years. That's very exciting. They have this nationwide study in a different population, because as a public health imperative, but also as a company's imperative, we in fact are cognizant of where in fact these opportunities are. We are going to be a U.S. Very high presence company, looking up list on the NASDAQ, but through my relationships with key private and public leaders in Asia, we in fact also will be there. On the issue of training, we actually completed Canada's first ever training program for just shy of 25 therapists at Braxia Institute. These are fantastic, well-trained, hyper-capable people who are now going to be the therapists in that first ever study I talked about that the Canadian government approved. And we're starting it. So it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to put this into action. So this is in fact the first study in treatment-resistant depression at our center, and it's been trained, our therapists are trained at our Braxia Institute. And on that note, because in fact we also, again, come back to this theme of scale, we want people with the core competencies to be the ones that do this. And so we have to be mindful and thoughtful as to how we're going to bring that to scale. So Braxia Scientific has now effectively created this module of training, and we're now taking it to scale. And that's going to be happening through brick and mortar, but also through digital, that we are campaigns. But I think it comes together, and again, this imperative of trying to affect positively depression and a scourge on public health.
And I just want to say that training, what he's doing is just so very important. Even talking to Rick Doblin at MAPS, one of the biggest bottlenecks that they've identified is going to be to train all these therapists to deliver MDMA psychedelic assisted therapy. So creating curriculum and technology that could do this more efficiently and get these therapists trained is extremely important for the industry to progress.
This is addressed to all the speakers. Thank you for coming and sharing. I'm interested in your thoughts on the role of telemedicine in this industry going forward, and how you'd like to see it implemented responsibly.
Sorry, what type of medicine did you say?
Telehealth.
Telemedicine. I think Roger's probably best situated for now to answer.
Yeah, so maybe I'll approach that. So we have a grant from the Canadian government through our Institute for Braxia to in fact look at integrating telehealth delivered cognitive therapy integrated with ketamine for people who are experiencing depression and suicidality. I should also mention the outcome of that study is not to reduce depression. The other outcome is to reduce it. So this is integrating a technology with the ketamine to realize an important health outcome. Now, there's aspects around privacy and different jurisdictions have rules and regulations on this. There's different capabilities, there's different platforms. That's a longer, separate conversation. But the question really is, can in fact telehealth address the unmet need of access to these treatments? The answer is yes, it can. And frankly, if we had this conversation 3-4 years ago, I would have been probably I would have been approaching this more theoretical, because psychiatry's always been this laggard. And this goes back to socio-cultural, political, and economic reasons why psychiatry was kind of a laggard in adopting telehealth. But with COVID, we had no choice. And it's, the horse out of the barn, it's not going to go back in, and it's here to stay. That being said, again, you hear me saying this over and over again. We need to have the parameters in place. We need to have fidelity to best practices. So what we're doing in our study, this is the first time it's ever been done, integrating ketamine with telehealth, manualized base, to treat suicide. So I think that's the example of the scientific leadership, the type of business opportunity, and also that social imperative that we're bringing together. So absolutely, it's the answer, yes.
And I'll just say that, a lot of what we've been speaking about tonight has been about federal or FDA or Health Canada kind of clinical trials, but there's also this huge movement going on at a city and state level. My nonprofit is really focused on legal reform at a city and state level, and we actually, last legislative session, our nonprofit drafted a 50-page bill to legalize psilocybin and other psychedelics, and it was mainly modeled on Measure 109 out in Oregon, but there was a few distinct differences, and one of those differences was that we actually included the ability to do telehealth in our bill. Measure 109 did not include that, but we decided to include it. We were drafting that during the pandemic, and we had multiple calls with our advisory board, and we thought it was the right thing to do. So I thought it's worth mentioning that not only do we have what's happening at an FDA level, but it's also important to kind of pay attention to the bills that are being filed at a state level. I don't know if any other panelists have anything to say about telehealth? No? Okay.
Just in telehealth, with the results that came out from Compass Pathways yesterday, there was 5% of the patients had a reverse reaction, which is some of them pretty serious suicidal ideation, and looks like it's a very serious health indication, treatment-resistant depression. So, and it sounds like a few folks might have passed. So it's unfortunately not irregular for that health indication, but it seems like it's a great opportunity for more telehealth opportunities for like 24/7 counselor, like when people need help. Because you can imagine in this case, and in our case as well, so you basically have 4 weeks of therapy intake, and you have your dose the first week of week 5, and then 4 weeks of psychotherapy, and then dose again. In our case, that's our protocol, so 2 doses. But when you're feeling down, in our case, maybe you're going back to the bottle, and your counseling appointment isn't for 3 days or 4 days, you can't wait, you need help right away. So I'm hoping, and we've been talking to our clinical team about this, and we do have a safety monitor, so that a doctor's available 24/7. But I'm hoping that telemedicine plays more of an important role for those patients that can't wait for that next in-person counseling session. And I haven't heard much about it in the industry, but I know it seems like something really important.
And I'll say, there's the preparation, the administration, and the integration of these medicines. So, we have invested in several VR companies that are really focused more on the preparation and the integration. So when we talk about telehealth and doing things at home, maybe it doesn't necessarily include the administration of the compound, but potentially it could include the preparation or integration. For example, there's a company that has a VR platform that's allowing people to connect with other people and kind of come into this virtual world and go through a group integration session, not actually under the influence of psychedelics, but after taking psychedelics. And if you think about
how alcohol addiction or other addiction has been dealt with in the past, it's really been dealt with in groups. So the idea of being able to kind of use virtual reality to bring people together, or the metaverse, I know that's kind of a buzzword right now, but I do imagine that the metaverse or virtual reality will include potentially bringing people together through integration, not necessarily into the actual administration of these compounds. Next question.
For this. This is incredible and really important and very exciting. So what I'm curious about is we talk about democratizing psychedelics and building and scaling businesses. And I'm really curious, how are you guys thinking about indigenous communities? As these communities brought a lot of that medicine to many of us, and a lot of us actually had first experiences sitting in ceremony. So how are you thinking about supporting these communities just really on that journey that we're all on right now? That's super exciting, and obviously you're helping a lot of people. And I know that some of you are using synthetic, but what is kind of the thinking, the opinions here around indigenous elder communities? Thank you. Oh yes, sorry, my name is Vanya. I'm not so good with the mic, but my name is Vanya. Really, really great to be here, everyone. Thank you.
So I'll be the bold front runner on this because I know it's an important topic, and candidly, I'm not sure that we figured it out. I think there is a lot of different ways to do it, and there's a lot of different communities who are in different types of need. It's something that we're talking about and we're trying to understand. We did start out with, this is our idea, and we approached a community and they're like, we would like actually to tell you what it is we need. And which is, it's kind of typical Canadian speaking. So I'm a First Nation person in Canada, actually, although I didn't look like it. So it is important to me because there are multiplicity of people in our family who suffer with a variety of things, who've been treated with psychedelic medicine in traditional practice. So, like I say, I don't know that I actually have a great answer for you, but I think, please know that some of us are thinking about it and trying to listen and understand. And again, like I say, identify where we can be of service, because it's like someone said the anecdote the other day. I think everyone here can agree that we'd like the perfect world. And then if I ask each one of us what that looks like, we're going to get a lot of different answers. So this is part of our challenges, trying to figure out where and how do we apply what we'd like to do. And it could be over a number of years, and it could be in small places and big places. And so I know it's not a really well-landed, direct, I've got the way, but it's honest.
Yeah, and I think it's a very complex question and issue, and I think a lot of these biotech companies would be wise to consult with the indigenous communities, since they have been doing this for thousands of years. I will say, at kind of a city and state level, I've drafted several decriminalization bills, and I've collaborated. I've probably some people here from Nature, and I've talked to them, and there's kind of this issue with including peyote in there, because it's a safe medicine people and it's actually in low supply, and we actually took peyote out for those reasons. And I appreciate Decrim Nature, if anyone is out there, I appreciate that kind of advice that you gave us on doing so. So, there's kind of, I think, a lot of ways that we could pull in the indigenous community. One is, using them as advisors, seeing that they've been doing this for a long time, but also make sure they're just a part of the community, that they have a seat at the table when we're drafting bills and rule resolutions at like a city and state level as well.
Hello. My name's Brahm. I came in a little late, so sorry if this was already discussed. Lots of talk about ketamine on the panel tonight, and for the record, personally a big fan of ketamine, but one of the things that sets ketamine apart from other drugs is that it does have a potential to be addictive and be abused. And I personally know multiple people that have sought ketamine-assisted therapy to get off of alcohol, and then a couple weeks later they're now addicted to ketamine. This is just directed at the panel in general. What are your thoughts on that? And if our company is working on ketamine-assisted therapy, especially to get off of addiction, what data are you collecting, measuring, putting in place to make sure that people don't, stop being addicted to booze, but now they're addicted to ket, and they're trying to live in the ketaverse full time.
Roger, I'll take that first. So our treatment program for alcohol addiction using ketamine. There's 3 active sessions of ketamine in the treatment program. And I don't think that's enough to develop a tolerance or a dependency upon ketamine. The team has brought it through a clinical trial with 96 people, clinical trial, phase 2AB, under the regulation of the MHRA in the UK, which is the UK's competent authority, with no adverse effects during that clinical trial. So, to me, we're looking at a totality of the damage done to society. The total damage to society done by alcohol considerably outweighs the damage done to society by pretty much any other substance. And so it's beholden upon us to find better solutions for individuals that are suffering of this. But I don't think anyone that we treat would develop a dependency on ketamine based upon a 3-session ketamine treatment program over the space of 12 months, or sorry, 12 weeks, I beg your pardon. But people that we treat in our clinic, because our clinic is integrated into the community, we stay in touch with the people that we treat. So, we'd like to think that we have an understanding of what they're going through, and have an awareness of what they may or may not be back into.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really, really important question, and I think that it's something that needs to be front and center. It needs to, in fact, be addressed with clarity, but also with evidence. And in our clinical practice guidelines, we spoke to this very issue, and I wanted to say a few words about this. So in medicine, broadly, there's dozens of examples where a medicine intends to treat a disease state, but can also make it worse. Some antibiotics could actually make you more prone to superinfections. Many anticonvulsants for seizure disorders can actually cause seizures. So the conclusion in the example of an anticonvulsant, many anti-seizure drugs can cause seizures. So the conclusion is, let's not use anti-seizure drugs. The conclusion is, let's use them carefully under medical supervision in the right patient. Now, in the world of drug discovery and development, if a drug is associated with a behavior that's close to the behavior you're trying to treat, that actually tells you something of promise. Maybe you're in the right zip code. Maybe you have to tweak the zip code in a way to make it safer. What I'm saying is the following. There's no doubt that ketamine is a drug of abuse. Some countries, some centers, it's worse than others. But I can also say this, is that there's no evidence at all that using ketamine under medical supervision with the parameters that are put in place has been shown to lead to abuse, to lead to misuse, or diversion, or serve as a gateway drug. So like anything, when you go to the oncologist and that person says you've got pancreatic CA, and they say to you, do you want a treatment that works and may have some side effects, or do you want a treatment that doesn't really work, but at least you won't have any side effects? You have to match the treatment to the disease. And depression is the greatest destruction of humanity around the world. And so you talk to families like I do, where their son just killed himself or hung himself in the basement. And they come to me and they say, how come this guy didn't get appropriate treatment for his depression? Well, because my doctor was concerned about this and concerned about that. So now they're at the funeral home. So I think we need to put patients front and center. We need to respect their suffering. And we need to actually have clarity what the evidence is. And that comes back to what I said earlier. And that is and that's why Brax is leading this, we've got to develop these treatments in a way that's in keeping with best practices. And when you do that, there's no evidence in drugs or abuse.
Quick follow-up actually to this. I'm back here. is there any communication going on between ketamine clinics so that people don't do like what has happened with other drugs where, okay, maybe they're doing 3 sessions over 12 weeks with you, and then they're doing that across 5 clinics, and then they're doing ketamine every day. Is there any kind of interclinical conversation, communication?
Your question is an outstanding question. It's a zinger, actually. And I'm going to make you a co-author on our next clinical practice guidelines, because in the guidelines it says what we need now is an integrated network, not only to serve as a repository of data collection, but for what you were getting at, this is, healthcare provider shopping and this type of behavior that goes on. So no, it does not occur. It does not occur. But I also think, frankly, we should not conflate that with the human need to alleviate the suffering and suicide. But that's a very important point. We put that front and center in our guidelines.
So I'll just take that one. In the UK, where we have our clinics, there's a central repository. I don't know who asked the question, it's a bit brighter, but there's a central repository. So our doctors prescribe, they get them from registered pharmacies, and it's done on a prescription, it's done back to the patient's ID. So we have visibility and an understanding of whether or not the patient is going to 2 different clinics, because they get referred to us by their GP. We provide the information back to their GP. The GP communicates with the pharmacy, so that situation couldn't actually arise in the UK.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we have a registry, obviously, for opioids, because that's exactly what people were doing. They were going from clinic to clinic getting prescriptions of opioids, so you would think it wouldn't be that hard to kind of use that infrastructure for the opioid registry for ketamine. So I'd imagine it could be, if it becomes an issue, unfortunately, in society, we kind of wait for something to become an issue to actually act. So ideally, I think it's a good idea to maybe actually start some sort of registry before it becomes an issue, and just be prudent about it.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Jose. For this question, I would love the panel to get a little bit creative in answering it. Maybe synthesizing a sentence, because I feel this is a question that everybody has, and for the whole world as well. We talk a lot about accessibility, improving the way of giving this medicine to as many people as possible for them to get away from ineffective medicines. Could you guys speak a little bit about how we could reduce the cost outside of reimbursement and insurance? We know that there is plenty of funding in the industry. That's apparent for everybody, especially in the public domain. So what could we do internally as an industry to allow this to be something that, say, my friends, my family, my people close to myself and millions of others that could not afford a $6,000 treatment, even $2,000, how could we get to that point without waiting for the most inefficient organization in the world, the government? Thank you.
Couple of just ideas here. I mean, I think we got, obviously we talked a little bit about telehealth. Obviously that's an opportunity there, because you don't have to deal with the huge overhead of a clinic. So, some of the different telehealth companies are able to provide ketamine therapy for as low as $150 to $200 per session, whereas a lot of the clinics are charging about $600 per session. The other thing that I think is really interesting, was also mentioned earlier, is group therapy. Obviously, if you're able to kind of do this in a group setting and charge a certain amount of money for the entire group, that's another way to bring costs down. And I actually think group therapy could be a really good thing, also just more efficacious potentially as well. So those are just a couple things that I've seen that we kind of discussed.
It's kind of like any business. You standardize and you scale, right? And if you can standardize and scale, you can reduce costs. If you can reduce costs, you can potentially bring costs down, or prices down, I should say. So the phase 2B ketamine trial that we had licensed from the University of Exeter, that was designed by the University of Exeter at the request of the National Healthcare System in the UK. And the reason that they asked for that trial to be designed in a particular way was they just don't have the infrastructure and the staff model to deliver psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So they just don't have enough qualified therapists. They don't have a staffing model that may always enable them to have the same therapist there to treat a patient or a client over a multi-week treatment program. So they posed the question to Professor Celia Morgan. They said, how can you design psychedelic assisted therapy to treat alcohol addiction, which is a massive social problem for us, in a way that could potentially be delivered in our infrastructure. So she said about, there's kind of two types of therapy. There's manualized and there's formulation driven. Manualized is, like it says in the tin, it's very standardized, and the other one is it's kind of bespoke and designed to the individual and how they present. So she designed that treatment protocol to be delivered by relatively inexperienced or relatively low qualified therapists. And that is a way that it is possible to reduce or to deliver psychedelic assisted therapy at a potentially lower price point. But I think the ultimate goal here is it's got to be on-label use for these medicines, and that's what they are, they're medicines. So they should be on-label, they should be reimbursed by the insurance companies, and they should be available in the public healthcare system. And that is how they're delivered at a price point that is available to the 90% or the 95% of the population that don't have 6,000 sterling dollars, whatever, in their disposable income, and who are suffering now.
You know, I was going to pick up on Dustin's comment earlier, and I agree with you, that the opportunity around cost in the near term is going to be technology, quite frankly. And that is the opportunity. And when you start to do the breakdown, depends which jurisdiction you're in. Of course, America is a different set of calculations in countries because of the extraordinary pharmacy benefit manager power in this country and how they don't negotiate costs and so on. But the details aside for a moment, the big picture is it is technology. The other issue is when you look at the cost of mental illness to society across common and all severe mental disorders, the cost is largely a function of chronicity of the illness. And we have for the first time a reason to believe, and it's a lot easier to believe what's believable, and we have a reason to believe that this new wave, this new renaissance, may furnish for us treatments that can actually eliminate symptoms of the illness, reduce the chronicity of the illness. And that will then provide a cost-effectiveness model that will be appealing to the people, the actuary, the mathematics types who do the reimbursement. Because the problem in psychiatry at stateside, federal side, in America, public and private, is that the treatments have not been able to reduce the chronicity or reduce the human capital loss. So it's very difficult to show this drug's cost effective. It's a different calculation with these treatments because they're much more effective and people's human capital is coming back. And so that changes the calculation on negotiation. But for those, in fact, who don't have health insurance or don't have public or private, the opportunity will be in the technology. There's no question about that to reduce the cost.
All right, I think that was going to be our last question for the night. So first of all, thank you to all our panelists for coming and joining us, apparently almost exclusively from outside the country.
Wait, I gotta say, thank you very much, Sam Baum. It's actually Sam's birthday tonight.
Whoa, happy birthday!
I had this guy working last night past midnight. Now he's working tonight. He's doing an incredible job. So happy birthday.
Anything for the cause. And I really am. I'm a huge advocate and believer that this work is massively important. And I got involved because I think the mental health treatments that are available are disturbingly horrible. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's epidemic. It's costing so much in so many ways. Like if you could actually break down the financials of it, it would be overwhelming that as much money is going into it, it's not even close to how much it's costing. And I also think that it's just important for people to live healthier, more stable, and also more connected, which is something that didn't quite come into the conversation as much today, which I think is okay. That there's a lot of different conversations to be had around psychedelics, but there is something that psychedelics do that sort of underlies all of the things that you were talking about, which help people have a better understanding of themselves, has a better understanding of the people that they're in the communities that they're part of. And with that, I think that a lot of these things that are mental health issues, addiction, depression, that's where the big gap can arise from, right? So it's important on a lot of different levels. Thank you again, Dustin, for the amazing work of bringing such amazing people to this community and bringing people together. Something I always like to do at the end here, if you are involved in psychedelics somehow, and you're open to having people come up to you and connect after this, don't feel any pressure if you don't. Just please raise your hand so that other people can see. So look around, a lot of people who are involved in the space. If you want to learn more, there's the panelists are here, but all of these people also are doing lots of things. So please connect. Keep coming back, keep spreading the word, keep sharing the articles as they get published. You know, the more awareness, the more advocacy, the faster that we're going to see some of these solutions be available to people. So thank you all very much. Thank you so much for all the work. Raul over there for the sound, big ups. And to Jamie and Erica who were serving drinks too.
Yeah, we'll be on floor 2 having drinks afterwards if anyone wants to network. Go ahead, we got another one. All right, she's not letting us get out of here. That's good. We can talk all night about this. It's as long as you guys want to stay here.
My name is Yu. Thank you for being here and thank you for having us. We hear a lot about the big pharmaceutical companies and the industry want to keep the population sick and depressed and asleep as opposed to awaken. Do you see that as a potential challenge in the future? And if so, how do we overcome that obstacle? I don't know if it's true, but everybody says that.
Well, look, I don't speak with one voice on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry, but I have worked with the pharmaceutical industry for 25 years. And what I hear from them is they say to me, how can we make it? And they're only as good as the solutions they were given. I have been an academic and a scholar and a scientist throughout my career, and the ideas that we gave them were quite underwhelming. They work with what we gave them. Industry's job is to execute and to pursue the profit motive. Academia is to create. And all they did was implement what we gave them, which was pretty underwhelming. We now have treatments. Ketamine was developed by the U.S. government in depression. We have treatments that we're developing now that are truly innovative. And I can tell you, again, I'm not here to defend the pharmaceutical industry. I don't speak for them. They're interested in making money. And if we, in fact, can give them tools that they can take to scale globally, because whether you like it or not, it was Pfizer that saved the world. It was Moderna that saved the world. Whether you like it or not, it's the truth. And we need these types of partners to end the scourge of depression. And they're interested in making money, full stop. I'd rather give them something innovative that changes people's lives and saves lives. Believe me, they're on the same page.
Mostly, not so much for Spravato. You know, they've gotten involved a little bit in the nasal spray, but they're sitting on the sidelines, and their MO is that they're going to get involved and probably acquire whoever is successful. So that's what happened with, we talked about GW Pharma with Epidiolex. They were acquired by Jazz for over $7 billion. I would imagine if Compass Pathway is successful with psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, billion, whatever it might be. So they're in it for money, and they could write very big checks. And what's also important, they also have very deep pockets, and it's going to be very, very, very expensive to commercialize these compounds once they're approved. So whether you like it or not, getting the big pharma involved because they have infrastructure and the capital to really, and the distribution to really commercialize these compounds, it's kind of, in my opinion, a necessary evil, and we will be seeing that. They're just waiting for the companies to be successful so they can buy them out.
I might add just one other thing to that is that they have a direct line to the payers, to the insurance companies. It's really powerful because that's how they also make money. So, you know, we can have opinions about making money being good or bad, but I think that the ultimate when we're tying back into the accessibility is developing codes that people can attribute to cover a variety of things. And this Spravato team reached out to us to talk about how can we develop some codes to deploy their technology so that we can get better outcomes, because they're actually having a really hard time. As much as everybody's like, go Spravato and thinking it's going great, it's hard because they're sitting for 2 hours and they play the code of payer code afterwards. So some of the therapists are dropping Spravato. And I think in order for us to be really successful, we do have to have codes that incent the people in the industry to adopt the indication. So just kind of bringing it full circle in that there are avenues that are useful to us, but you know, thoughtfully deployed, I think it'll be.
We got another question over there if you want to shout it out.
Actually, just a really quick comment for you. You know, the insurance companies, and especially the big companies, loud.
We'll stay here all night, so you know if anyone. Yeah, we'll wrap it up. This is the last question.
Just a quick comment to what you're saying. I mean, the insurance companies, and especially the private company, the insurance providers for the big companies that are privately insurancing all their employees, what they're looking for is to save money and efficacy. So you show them efficacy and cost, and they're going to go. I mean, they don't really care what the FDA does, to be honest with you. They're totally separate. And you show them a graph of how they can save money. They're gonna start paying as soon as possible.
And I think this is part of the thing that we're all after, is like getting to the root of the thing and not just treating the symptom.
Yeah.
So net we can show, and across many indications, that the total cost of ownership of a patient is less, utilizing psychedelic medicines as a class. So
you just start lobbying.
One last comment with
Start lobbying
wrap up.
now.
Yeah, it's interesting with ketamine, like Johnson & Johnson's was anticipating this to be like a great win for them, but the ketamine product has not been, they've put in millions. Their sales now are maxing out at about 100 million, and they're quite disappointed, and they lost their data exclusivity case in Canada at least. And so I think that they've learned some lessons from this. So I think they're going to be cautious because it hasn't gone well. And just as startups, we're all these startups, and many startups like ours, we do the phase 1, phase 2, and then we partner with Farmer for licensing, because you want to go hire dozens of sales reps to run across the country to promote your product. It's a different business model distribution. So at some point there will be a partnership there. But it's interesting when you're doing a startup and the opportunities for people you meet. Like we had this. There's like Purdue, which is, you may recognize that a name. They unfortunately created oxycodone, which is horrible scourge across North America. And so we definitely had some interest for them to participate, and we respectfully declined because we just didn't want to be associated with that. So nothing against them personally, but it's just unfortunate. So we have opportunities as startups to align with the right partners and ensure that our values are aligned, and we are helping patients in the end. So the big pharma is going to come, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, guys, so we all of us obviously love talking about this. I'm going to be down on floor 2.
Floor 1, actually.
Floor 1, sorry. There'll be drinks and food on floor 1. I'll be down there, so happy to discuss this further. Once again, round of applause for our panelists. Thank you guys so much for coming out.